Welcome to Tony Style Motivation, the place where silence becomes power, where stillness becomes strategy, and where we stop chasing love and start embodying it. You finally start to feel them leaning in. The avoidant, the one who always kept a wall up, who seemed so comfortable in distance, is slowly letting their guard down. It's subtle. Maybe they start opening up about their day without being asked. Maybe they linger longer in conversation, stay just a little closer, send a message that carries a little more warmth. And you feel it. This is different. Something's shifting. You want to grab it, hold it, run with it. But here's the test. Can you handle that shift without breaking it? Because what happens next, that's where most people fall apart. That's where the emotional trapdoor opens. The moment they get a little closer, we feel a tidal wave of hope rush in, and with it, the urge to do something, to define the moment, to say something deep, to ask where this is going, to get more, fast. We want to fill the space, the silence, the unknown. But listen carefully, that silence, the one you're rushing to fill, isn't empty, it's sacred. When an avoidant starts getting closer, they're not charging forward with abandon. They're tiptoeing through emotional territory that used to set off alarms in their nervous system. They're not skipping into intimacy. They're checking for landmines. So what might look like hesitation, or coldness, or uncertainty, might actually be deep internal processing. They're regulating, recalibrating, trying to assess whether it's finally safe to show more. And in that silence, your reaction becomes everything. Most people panic. They say too much. They start questioning, pushing, seeking confirmation. Do you feel the same way? What's happening between us? Where do we stand? Not because they're wrong for wanting closeness, but because they're afraid of losing the moment. And that fear, it leaks into every word. It turns energy that was soft and inviting into pressure. And pressure is what sends avoidance straight back behind their wall. But if you can resist that urge, if you can sit in the space they've created and not try to control it, you send a completely different message. You show them, I'm not going to crowd you. I'm not going to rush this. I respect your pace. I trust the moment. And that message, that creates safety. That's what keeps the door open. It's not about being cold or distant yourself. It's not about playing games or pretending not to care. It's about learning how to be present without being intrusive, warm without being overwhelming, available without being anxious. That's what makes all the difference. Because deep connection doesn't always look like fireworks and intensity. Sometimes it looks like two people sitting in quiet understanding. It looks like not needing to fill every gap with talk. It looks like letting someone breathe even in closeness. You want to show someone that they can come closer without fear. Show them that you don't flinch in the silence, that you don't need to make the moment bigger than it is, that you can just be, and let them be too. There is power in not chasing every inch of progress with a mile of questions. There is strength in restraint, in letting things unfold without force, in showing someone, especially an avoidant, that they are free to step into intimacy on their own terms, and that you'll be right there, steady, calm, grounded. That steadiness, that trust you build in the silence, is what pulls them closer again, and again, and again, until one day they realize that this connection doesn't feel like all the others. It doesn't feel like pressure. It doesn't feel like loss of control. It feels safe, because you were safe. You didn't panic. You didn't chase. You stayed. And that's what most people miss. It's not just about what you do when they lean in. It's about what you don't do. You don't rush to fill the gap. You don't suffocate the moment. You don't overreach. You just let it breathe. So when you feel that shift when they get closer, resist the urge to define it, fix it, or lock it down. Trust the moment. Let the silence speak. Because in that space is where the real connection begins. They finally give you a glimpse, just a flicker, of what's going on beneath the surface. Maybe it's something small, A moment of vulnerability, a story they've never told before, a quick flash of emotion in their voice. It might even seem insignificant to someone else, but you know what it means. You know how guarded they've been. You know how much it takes for them to share anything real. And when that moment happens, your heart kicks into overdrive. You feel this surge, this urgency, to respond, to connect, to grab onto that moment before it slips away. Maybe it looks like asking 5 follow-up questions. Maybe it's telling your own story right away so they know they're not alone. Or maybe it's pressing for more, trying to finally get to the root of it all. But here's the challenge: that emotional surge in you, if left unchecked, can undo everything they just risked. That energy, that intensity, that unfiltered reaction, that's the exact thing that makes an avoidant feel unsafe. And it's not because you're wrong to feel it. It's because their system is wired to interpret emotional overload as danger, even if it's coming from love. Most people don't realize this. Most people think connection is about showing more, feeling more, giving more. And while that matters, the timing of it is everything. When someone avoidant steps into closeness, they're already on edge. Their nervous system is scanning for signs that it's about to get overwhelmed, consumed, or cornered. They're not judging you. They're trying to survive what closeness feels like in their body. So if your emotional reaction comes at full speed, it confirms their old fear. This is going to be too much. I need to pull back. But here's where you shift the game. You learn to regulate your emotional response before you react. That means you don't immediately grab onto their vulnerability like it's your only chance. You don't let fear or excitement dictate what you say next. You take a breath. You feel the pull and you ground yourself. You respond from a place of calm strength, not desperation, not anxiety. That kind of energy, that's rare. That's magnetic, because emotional regulation isn't about shutting down or pretending not to care. It's the opposite. It's being so anchored in your own center that you don't have to react out of fear. You don't need to control the moment. You can actually hold it. You can let it be what it is without twisting it into what you wish it could be. And for someone who's spent their life trying to avoid emotional flooding, that's everything. You see, the avoidant isn't just testing you. They're testing their own capacity to show up emotionally without drowning. And if you show up with calm, with steadiness, with presence, they start to believe they can too. You're not just modeling emotional maturity. You're creating a safe place where they don't have to run anymore. But the second you let your triggers take over, when you blurt out your fears, when you demand clarity, when you ask them to define the relationship on your schedule, you throw them back into survival mode, not because you're wrong to want answers, but because you're coming from reactivity, not response. So what do you do instead? You feel the emotion, but you don't act on it instantly. You notice the inner child in you that's hungry for certainty, and you don't shame it, but you don't let it lead either. You lead, you bring maturity to the front. You say to yourself, I can hold this. I don't need to react. I don't need to push. I can just respond with presence. That's how you flip the script. Because let's be honest, anyone can react. Anyone can let their nervous system run the show. But the real power is in restraint, in awareness, in being the one in the room who knows what they're feeling and still chooses to stay grounded. And that's what makes someone irresistible to an avoidant. Not manipulation, not mind games, not pretending not to care, but being emotionally solid, being able to feel without falling apart. That's the kind of presence that shifts the entire dynamic. Because now, they're not afraid of drowning in your emotion. They feel invited, not overwhelmed. They feel understood, not chased. They feel safe to take the next step. Not because you asked them to, but because your energy made it possible. That's the difference between losing them and leading them into connection. And that's how you hold onto the moment without pushing them away. They take a step forward, not a leap, just a step. Maybe they share something more personal. Maybe they show up when they don't have to. Maybe they send a message that's a little softer, a little more open. It's a shift you feel before you even fully process it. And in that split second, something inside you wants to move faster. You want to close the distance. You want to meet them with everything you've been holding back. But that's where the test begins. This is the moment most people blow it. Because when someone who's been emotionally unavailable finally leans in, the natural response is to overcorrect. You want to reward the progress, you want to show them how ready you are, so you go big, you start planning the future. You open the emotional floodgates, you think, finally, we're getting somewhere, let's keep going, but for someone with avoidant tendencies, that sudden surge can feel like a trap. It doesn't matter if your intentions are pure. The moment the energy becomes too much, too soon, their survival brain kicks in and tells them to retreat. To them, connection isn't just about closeness, it's about pacing, and if the pace feels too fast, they instinctively protect themselves by pulling back. Not because they don't like you, not because they don't feel something, but because their nervous system only knows safety through control, and intensity feels like a loss of that control. So when they move a little closer, your move isn't to accelerate, your move is to mirror. When they open the door slightly, don't kick it wide open. Just acknowledge it. Step gently into the space they're offering, and let that be enough for now. If they say something vulnerable, meet it with warmth, but not an avalanche of emotional intensity. If they ask to spend time with you, enjoy it. But don't suddenly plan every weekend together. If they show you they care, don't demand they say it out loud every day. This is where real emotional intelligence comes in, because it takes strength to match energy without trying to exceed it. It takes discipline to hold back the urge to define everything the moment something starts to feel good. And it takes wisdom to understand that true connection isn't built by chasing, it's built by aligning. So ask yourself, are you reacting to your own fears or responding to their level of readiness? Are you trying to secure something, or are you honoring what's unfolding in real time? When you mirror instead of chase, you create a sense of emotional safety. You let them feel like they can move at a pace that doesn't overwhelm their system. You show them that this isn't about control, this isn't about pressure, it's about respect, respect for their process. Respect for your own grounding, and respect for the timing that real intimacy requires. This doesn't mean you dim your light. It doesn't mean you hide how you feel. It means you stay conscious of the rhythm between you. You don't dance ahead of the music. You stay in step, you read the moment, and you adjust with precision. If they come forward with 10%, you give 10% back. Not 90%, not your life story, not the emotional deep dive they didn't ask for. Just enough to show, I see you, I'm here, and I'm not rushing this. That's what makes you different. That's what makes them feel safe. Because they've likely been with people who tried to force connection. People who reacted too fast, got too deep, and made them feel emotionally cornered. But you don't chase. You respond, you don't force intimacy. You create the conditions for it to grow. That's leadership. That's emotional strength. And something powerful happens when you match someone's level of intimacy instead of trying to dictate it. They start to trust themselves more in your presence. They stop bracing for impact. They begin to associate closeness with peace, not pressure. And over time, they move toward you, not because they were pushed, but because they chose to. Because here's the truth most people miss. You don't get someone to open up by trying to pull them closer. You do it by becoming someone they feel safe opening up to, and safety doesn't shout, it doesn't demand. It mirrors, it listens, it waits, and when the timing is right, it meets vulnerability with grounded presence, not emotional overwhelm. That's how you build something that lasts, not by chasing love, but by meeting it where it's ready to grow. You've been patient, you've held back the urge to chase, you've matched their pace, and now the connection is beginning to take root. You can feel it, deeper, more consistent, more real. But something in you still wants clarity, still wants answers, still wants to know where you stand, and that's completely human. But this is where everything can either build or break. Because the moment your need for certainty turns into pressure, the avoidant starts to feel that old familiar discomfort again. The pressure doesn't even have to be aggressive. It can be subtle, a tone, a word, a shift in your energy. And suddenly they're no longer responding to you, they're responding to a threat. Not because you are one, but because their nervous system has been trained to see emotional demand as danger. It's not about what you say, it's how you say it. It's the energy behind it. The difference between an invitation and a demand is night and day. Most people try to get connection through control. We need to talk. I need to know what we are. Why aren't you opening up more? These statements might come from a real place of longing, but they're received as commands. And for someone avoidant, that creates the exact thing they fear most: expectation without safety. If you want someone to stay open, you have to learn the language of emotional safety. You have to communicate in a way that says, you're free here, you don't owe me more than what you're ready for, but I value honesty and I value connection. So instead of saying, why don't you ever express how you feel, you can say, I appreciate when you share with me. It helps me feel more connected to you. Instead of saying, I feel like I'm the only one trying, say, I've been thinking a lot about how we connect. Would you be open to talking about it sometime? Same intention. Totally different experience. One triggers defensiveness, the other invites closeness. This isn't about tiptoeing or hiding your truth. This is about emotional precision. Power isn't in volume, power is in how you deliver what you feel. You can express your needs without making someone feel like they've failed. You can speak your truth without turning it into an ultimatum. You have to remember, avoidants have been conditioned to believe that emotional closeness always comes with a price. That they'll be judged, that they'll lose their autonomy, that they'll have to perform to stay safe. So, when your communication adds pressure, even if it's unintentional, it confirms their worst belief: I'm not enough, I'm going to disappoint them, I need to back away. But if your words feel like an open door instead of a closing wall, everything changes. If they sense that your energy is grounded, that you're expressing, not demanding, that's when they exhale. That's when they lean in. You show them you can hold a conversation about feelings without turning it into a storm. That you're not here to extract promises, but to explore possibilities. That's the difference between connection and collapse. And it all comes down to the way you frame what you want to say. It takes maturity to communicate in a way that centers clarity and compassion. It takes self-control to speak from presence instead of panic. You don't have to water yourself down. You don't have to bury your needs. But you do have to deliver them in a way that invites the other person in, not corners them. You have to become someone who leads with curiosity instead of fear, who speaks with intention, not emotional chaos. Someone who creates a climate of conversation that says, we're in this together, and I'm not here to control you. I'm here to understand you. That kind of communication doesn't just keep the door open, it builds a bridge, and on that bridge you'll meet each other halfway. Not because you forced it, but because you learned how to invite it. That's how you stop pushing them away without sacrificing your truth. They finally did it. They showed up when you weren't sure they would. Maybe it wasn't a grand gesture, maybe it was small. But to them, it was huge. They remembered something you said and brought it up. They reached out first. They stayed in the conversation a little longer than usual. They didn't vanish after a moment of connection. They stayed. And what you feel inside is this urge to highlight the progress, to say, see, you can do this. You feel the need to point out how far they've come, but here's the catch. If you're not careful, that moment of celebration can turn into a backhanded reminder of how far you think they still have to go, and that's the moment the wall starts to come back up. What most people don't realize is that with avoidance, progress isn't loud. It's subtle and it's vulnerable. Every move toward connection is a big internal risk for them, even if it looks minor on the outside. They've spent their whole lives retreating from closeness, from exposure, from expectations they didn't feel ready for. So when they finally take a step forward, what they need isn't a spotlight on what they haven't done yet. They need acknowledgement for what they did do. They need someone who recognizes effort without rushing the outcome. If you respond to a step forward by immediately asking for the next one, it signals to them that nothing is ever enough. And when someone already feels unsure about whether they're capable of being close, that can shut the whole thing down. It reinforces the very belief they've been battling internally. No matter what I do, it won't be enough, so I might as well not try. But when you slow down, when you look them in the eye and genuinely say, "Hey, I appreciated that," you give them something they rarely get. You give them the feeling of being seen without being judged. You tell them, without saying it outright, "You're not being measured here. You're being met." And when someone feels met instead of measured, they relax, they trust, they lean in again. People think connection is built through declarations and milestones. But real connection, it's built in the small moments that often get overlooked. It's in your tone when you say thank you. It's in your energy when they open up. It's in whether you celebrate their progress or remind them of where they're falling short. Think about it. If every time you worked up the courage to try something new, the person you were doing it for just said, "Yeah, but why didn't you do more?" how long would you keep trying? You'd start to feel like trying isn't worth the cost. And that's exactly how avoidants retreat back into their old patterns. But if instead every small effort is acknowledged, something different happens. They start to associate being close with feeling good, with being appreciated, with safety, and the moment that internal wiring starts to shift, the entire relationship changes. This doesn't mean you ignore your needs. It doesn't mean you accept breadcrumbs or lower your standards. It means you understand how momentum works. You don't build a bridge by criticizing the pace. You build it by reinforcing every step that's been taken. When you say, "Thank you for opening up," that meant a lot. Instead of, "Why can't we have conversations like this all the time?" you're creating a culture of connection. One where effort is recognized and growth is encouraged, not demanded. You become someone they want to open up to, not someone they feel they have to protect themselves from. You stop being the threat of inadequacy and start being the reward of effort. And when you show up with that energy consistently, they begin to change. Not because you force them, but because they feel emotionally safe enough to grow. That's how progress builds. That's how people evolve in connection, not under pressure, but through permission, not through criticism, but through celebration. Because what you reinforce, you get more of. When they start to lean in, your instinct might be to meet that movement with excitement, may be even intensity. You've been waiting for this, hoping for this, and now that it's happening, part of you wants to throw open the door, let everything pour out, and finally say what you've been holding back. That's a natural desire, but with an avoidant, that flood of emotion can feel less like connection and more like chaos. You have to remember, they're not just afraid of closeness, they're afraid of losing themselves in it. Their system doesn't recognize emotional intensity as intimacy. It registers it as a threat, not because they're weak and not because they don't care. It's because, for them, closeness often came with conditions, overwhelm, or pressure they couldn't process. So now, when emotions start rising, their instinct is to retreat, not because they want to, but because they don't yet know how to stay in the fire without getting burned. That's where you come in, not to match their fear with more fear, but to anchor the moment, to be the calm they don't know how to find yet, to be the steady force that says, without needing to say it, "You don't have to run. I'm not here to drown you. I'm here to hold this with you." Most people respond to an avoidance closeness by either pushing too hard or backing away completely. They think those are the only options, but there's a third path, a higher path, and that's learning how to be the anchor, not the tide. You're not here to overwhelm them with everything you feel. You're not here to withhold either. You're here to lead with centeredness. And that centeredness speaks louder than words ever could. Being the anchor means you don't need constant reassurance. You don't need the relationship to look perfect tomorrow. You don't need to chase validation at every turn. What they need is presence, the kind that doesn't flinch when things get quiet, the kind that doesn't react every time they hesitate, the kind that says, I trust the pace, I trust myself, and I don't need this to move faster than it's ready to. That kind of energy is magnetic to someone who's used to emotional instability. It's unfamiliar, in the best way, because they're used to people either demanding closeness or giving up. But you do neither. You stay, you breathe, you respond instead of react. You become the stillness they never knew they needed. You're not there to fix them. You're not there to change them. You're there to show them that closeness can exist without tension. That vulnerability doesn't always lead to chaos. That being seen doesn't have to come with a cost. And here's what happens when you embody that energy. They start to trust not just you, but themselves. They stop looking for the exit every time things get deep. They start believing, maybe I can handle this. Maybe closeness isn't as dangerous as I thought. That shift doesn't happen through force. It happens through example. And yes, it takes strength, real strength. Because being the anchor requires you to manage your own emotional storms. It requires you to soothe your own fears instead of asking them to do it for you. It requires patience, grace, and emotional leadership, but the payoff is powerful. You stop repeating old cycles. You stop pushing them away with pressure. You stop making their retreat about your worth, and you start building a connection rooted in safety. So when they get close, don't overwhelm the moment. Don't rush to define it. Don't let your anxiety speak louder than your presence. Just breathe, just hold steady. Be the one who doesn't need to chase or fix. Be the one who knows their own power. Because that's what gives them permission to stop running. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in love is to stay grounded when everything in you wants to reach. If this hit home, subscribe to Tony Style Motivation, where silence becomes your superpower and emotional mastery becomes your strategy. Drop a comment if you've ever felt this shift with someone avoidant, and share what changed everything for you. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not chase. It's hold steady. Let that sink in. We'll see you in the next one.